And so I asked the Lord in a very definite way to speak to my crew this evening. Before flying that evening, I told some Christian friends of mine who lived very near to the aerodrome that I had asked the Lord to speak to my crew again that evening. And I learnt later, and I was very surprised to learn, that they had spent the whole night in prayer. So concerned were they about this trip. They knew what it was to see 26 aircraft leave our squadron of an evening, and between 18 to 20 on an average return the following morning. We took off. Our target was München Gladbeck just as you come into the Ruhr. We reached it without anything uneventful happening. But just as we're running in over the target area, flying dead straight and level as you must for your bombing run, suddenly the bomb aimer gave a cry and said, "Come immediately." I had to leave my job of navigation and go down to see what was wrong. There had been a shattering explosion, and my bomb aimer was severely injured. As I was attending to this man who had one leg cut off, the femoral artery was severed, and there in the darkness, because I daren't put on a torch because the enemy fighters and the searchlights would have picked us up, in the darkness I was trying to attend to this man. It was a case of life or death. And as I was trying to help him with morphia and a tourniquet, the pilot said to me, "What's the course for base?" Well, you could imagine my predicament. Here I was in a life and death matter, confined in the narrow quarters of this bomb bay, in total darkness, trying to help this man, and the man over the phone's asking me to calculate a course for base. People don't realize that when you're flying over Germany in wartime, you must fly on very definite courses. Otherwise, you're liable to fly over one town on your own. And if you ever did that with their radar-controlled searchlights and gunfire, you wouldn't have a show in the wide. And so we had to go on very exact courses. Well, in my predicament, thank God, man's extremities are always God's opportunities. And I cried to the Lord, "Lord, give us a course." I mentally calculated where England was, and I said to the pilot, 273. 270 on the compass is due west. 273 is just west with a little dash of north in it. And I thought, well, that'll get us over England anyway, and then we can think of where we are. But you see, I had asked the Lord for that course. And have you ever known the Lord to make a mistake? Just one small, tiny, wee mistake? No, Jesus never fails. The Lord had given me that course, and He knew the right course for home. And the amazing thing was, I'll never forget it, as we flew in over England, of course, there were so many aerodromes down there during the war that it was very hard to identify them in the dark, and so each station had an identifying Morse code letter that was flashing all night. And of course these were changed from night to night. And I was never so surprised in all my life as my pilot and I looked out of the window, and there right beneath us was the flashing light of our own aerodrome. God had brought us in by the most direct route. He knew that we needed medical aid, needed it very fast. He brought us directly over that aerodrome. Now the wonderful thing was that even if I had calculated the course out very carefully, I must have made an alteration before we reached home because of making allowance for drift. The wind is constantly changing over these vast areas through which you have to fly. But the Lord had made all those calculations and was bringing us in by the most direct route. We circled the aerodrome preparatory to landing. We dropped down to 1,000 feet, 500 feet. At 300 feet we straightened out to make the approach onto the runway when suddenly an engine on the port wing cut out. Now you can still land a Sterling on 3 engines and get away with it. And if we had have done so, my pilot would have stuck out his chest a couple of feet and told all the boys what a clever boy he was. But the Lord, to make him realize that it was He, and He alone, who was delivering us, suddenly an engine cut out on the starboard wing. We were already down to 120 miles an hour, which is the stalling speed of a Sterling. It meant we couldn't stay in the air an instant longer. The nose dropped down, the tail went up, and down we came in a tremendous dive. You know, if you come down a high-speed lift in a big building, you know that rising within you have. Well, that's the feeling we had, only we didn't know what was going to happen when we reached the ground floor. And as we came towards the ground, I noticed my eyes were glued on the instruments. We were doing 96 miles an hour. Now, fortunately, we had big low-pressure tires, big tires. A lot of people don't realize how big a Sterling was. It was 20 feet longer than a Lancaster, and at that time it was the largest bomber ever built. And these big low-pressure tires broke the impact of the aircraft with the ground. We bounced, minus our undercarriage, which just broke away, and ahead of us as we came down again was a brick building with a big wooden door at the front and another big wooden door at the back. Well, we went in the front door and out the back without knocking. It just ripped off our wings and the tail and all the projecting pieces of the fuselage, and still we careered along the ground. Because believe me, when you get 22 tons up to 95 miles an hour, if you know anything at all about physics, you know that it takes more than wishful thinking and a lot of fast praying to stop it. And so by momentum we were racing along the ground, and ahead of us there was a crash crane with its wire ropes hanging down. This got entangled with what was left of our fuselage and spun us over and over, but stopped us and effectively locked the aircraft from going any further and prevented us going into the bomb dump, which was approximately 25 yards further on. And the bomb aimer, whom I thought must have been killed instantly because his body was in the nose of the aircraft, when we went to him fearing the worst, we found that he had been lifted up between 8 feet. The floor had touched the ceiling almost, and he was sandwiched in between, and we were just able to extricate him looking more dead than alive, rushed him away 7 miles to the hospital at Bury St. Edmunds, where he made a wonderful recovery. And so once again the Lord wonderfully answered prayer and proved his wonderful promise to me that I should not die but live and declare the wonderful works of my wonderful Lord.